Apple just announced iOS 12 at WWDC and gave us a rundown of a bunch of features. However, they did not have time to talk about all the features in iOS 12, and in this video, I'm gonna give you a look at 10 features that Apple did not tell you about. What is going on, Tech Squad? Andrew Evers here, editor-in-chief at GearLive.com. If this is your first time here, this channel is all about tech, gadgets, and gaming. So if you're into that kind of stuff, feel free to hit the subscribe button down below along with the bell notification icon so you don't miss any future videos. As I mentioned, we're gonna be covering 10 features in iOS 12 that Apple did not tell you about on stage at WWDC. Now, there are over 100 new features that Apple did not get to talk about. These are usually a lot smaller features that don't really matter. Things like some areas have curved corners instead of square corners. Some areas have different animations this year than they had last year. I'm not gonna talk about those types of things. I'm gonna talk about things that actually matter, that I think are actually good features that we should be looking forward to with iOS 12. So let's jump into it, starting with Face ID. Face ID now has the ability to recognize 2 different appearances. Yes, iOS 12 now allows you to give someone else access to your iPhone 10 in particular, using just their face. A new appearances section allows you to set up an alternate appearance so they can get into your device without needing to punch in your security code. So just like you could do with Touch ID, you can now register multiple faces with Face ID. Number 2, better portrait lighting effects. Portrait lighting came to the iPhone with iOS 11, and the results are pretty hit or miss. Sometimes they look really good, and sometimes they look ridiculously bad. With iOS 12, portrait lighting is still in beta, but it's a year later, and Apple has improved the portrait lighting algorithm. What they're now doing is generating a mask when it detects a person and then intelligently separates that person from the rest of the scene. What that means is we should see far less fuzziness and blurriness near the edges of a face, near the edges of a head, or even with hair around your ears. This should make your portrait lighting photos look a lot better. Up next, the Portrait Segmentation API. That might sound a little too technical, but all it means is that now developers, third-party developers, can get access to the same amount of data from your portrait cameras that Apple can with their first-party apps. This will allow for separation of layers in photos. The simplest example of this would be separating the background from the foreground of an image and allowing you to apply different filters on different parts of an image. So maybe you can apply a filter just to the subject but leave the background alone, or vice versa, or apply more or less blur to the background and leave the foreground alone. Up next, there is improved support for RAW images. If you're a photographer and you shoot in RAW, working with RAW images in Apple's photos has pretty much been a pain. It's still not amazing, but it has been drastically improved. In the past, Apple has allowed you to import RAW photos with the Lightning to SD card reader and a Lightning to USB cable. That's been there ever since iOS 10, but iOS 12 makes this even easier. You can now import and manage RAW photos right on an iPhone or iPad, and you can edit those RAW photos on an iPad Pro. That's right, you can do this right in Photos, no longer requiring a third-party app. Up next, longer Emoji messages. As soon as Emoji launched last year with the 10-second time limit, people were frustrated. People were recording their screens so that they can do the Emoji karaoke and make all sorts of funny videos using Emoji to get around Apple's 10-second time limit. Well, in iOS 12, the 10-second time limit is gone, and Apple has tripled it. You now get 30 seconds per recorded Emoji message, and that includes MeMoji. Apple did add 4 brand new Emojis. You can see here right below, there's a tiger, there's a koala, there's a T-Rex, and a ghost. But also what they did not mention, Apple is now allowing 30 seconds of Emoji recording instead of the 10 seconds that you had previously with iOS 11. Up next, a change to notifications. One quick change. Apple did a bunch of changes to notifications, including group notifications. Thank you, Apple. But this one is called critical notifications. And this allows you to treat certain notifications that are important different than all the rest of them. Now, this new type of notification is called a critical alert. In iOS 12, you'll be able to get notifications from things like healthcare apps and have them appear at the very top of your lock screen and notification center, and they'll even show up when Do Not Disturb is enabled. So imagine you have an app that reminds you to take your medicine at a certain time of day. Those notifications can be critical alerts. They can appear at the top of your notification screen, at the top of your lock screen, and come through even if you have Do Not Disturb enabled so that you don't miss them. That's just one example of what those apps can be, but obviously there are certain types of notifications that could be very literally life or death situations, and Apple is addressing that in iOS 12. Let's move on to the next big feature. This one is password search with Siri. Again, Apple has made some pretty interesting updates with Siri in iOS 12, but one of them that stood out to me was password search. So if you don't know your password for something, but it's saved in your Apple keychain, rather than having to poke through different settings to get to that area, you can just ask Siri for the specific password and it'll take you right to the password for that service or app. So check this out. What is my Twitter password? It's asking for the Face ID to confirm who I am. There we go. It brings me into the passwords and accounts area and right into the Twitter section where I can then tap and copy and paste my password. This is gonna make it easy for people who use the complicated passwords that Apple offers. Not complicated, but super strong passwords. You should be using individual, unique, super strong passwords for every service, but it's hard to remember those, and it's also tricky to remember where they are in the settings. So using Siri to get right to those passwords makes it easier for people to use strong passwords everywhere. Up next, passcode, transfers, and autofill. This goes off the same idea that we should all be using strong passwords, but not only that, we should also be using two-factor authentication wherever we can. One of the annoying parts though is you go to log into a service, then they text you a code that you then have to go into your messaging app, copy the code, jump back into the app you're trying to log into or the website you're trying to log into, paste it in, and then enter. Apple is now recognizing when you get one of those codes, automatically copies it so you don't have to leave the app, and then offers to paste it for you right there, saving a bunch of taps. Let's move on to number 9. Apple has disabled your Lightning port for data. Again, keeping up with security and keeping your data private, Apple has added an extra security measure in iOS 12 to keep your personal data safe. It will automatically disable your Lightning port if your phone hasn't been unlocked in the past hour. When this is enabled, this will prevent brute force hacking. If someone gets a hold of your phone and it hasn't been unlocked for over an hour, your Lightning port simply will not work for data. Now, we've seen this with the FBI and law enforcement in the past. They've been able to get people's phones and plug them into a brute force hacker to try to get into people's phones. What Apple's doing now is saying, hey, if this phone hasn't been used in over an hour, that Lightning port is gonna be useless to you. Of course, it'll be re-enabled as soon as you enter a password. And last but not least, on this list of 10 features that Apple did not tell you about at WWDC and iOS 12 is screenshot prevention. Now, I haven't had this problem. A lot of people have been complaining that ever since the iPhone 10 came out, they've been taking screenshots accidentally, and they've been doing it pretty much anytime they pick up their phone. So what Apple has done to mitigate this is they've made it so that in the first couple of seconds after your screen lights up, screenshots just simply won't work. So if you pick up your phone, you turned it on, and you squeeze it by accident, it'll take 2 or 3 seconds before the phone will allow a screenshot to be taken. And then once those 3 seconds have passed, you can take all the screenshots you want. But at least when you first pick up your phone, you now have some protection from filling your camera roll with screenshots of your lock screen. There you have it, guys. That was your look at iOS 12 and 10 features that Apple did not tell you about at WWDC. Drop a like on this one if you enjoyed it, and if you want to hear even more features Apple didn't tell you about, leave a comment down below and I'll meet you there for further discussion. Don't forget, you can click or tap on my face when it appears here at the bottom of the screen in order to subscribe for free to the channel so you don't miss any future videos. Thanks so much for watching. As always, guys, I appreciate your support. I'm Andrew Edwards, and I will catch you in the next video.